Exactly.
One for you and one for Aaron.
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.
Glad to have you all here this morning. We're going to do the Easter special and do 1 Kings chapter 9. Oh, is that the same thing we did last week? Well, just pretend it's the Easter special. Man. We are about to hit the point in this study where we break away from the stop line and hit the freeway 70 mile an hour, and the fence posts are going to be clipping by pretty fast for the remainder of our study. We've kind of been really stalled out here as we've taken and our author has taken this close look at the building of the temple and all that sort of thing, and they've really kind of focused in on one time period. And in this next little segment, we're going to take a whole bunch of years, and it's just going to go by zoom in one big chunk, and we're going to kind of hit some high spots, and then after that, boy, it's just full throttle through the rest of the book. And it's challenging sometimes even to just keep up with who is where and what is what, and it's talking about two different kings, and it's really interesting to try to sort it out. So we'll have quite a challenge just in the timeline of things, keeping track of who's on first and all that sort of thing. So you'll have to really buckle your seatbelts down tight. But this morning we just began to throttle up a little bit, but you know me, I can only throttle up so much before I get stalled somewhere. So we'll see how well that goes. But last time, you may remember, we finished building the temple, and we completed that work. And then we looked a little bit at the last vision that Solomon had as he come to the completion of it. God came and knocked on his door and spoke to him in this vision and gave him this repeated warning, which we've seen over and over again from Deuteronomy to the nation initially. And then we've seen the Lord come to him and make promises to him right early in his reign about what he would do for him, but the caution, but if you don't follow the rules, if you don't follow the word that I've laid down and the law the way you're supposed to, and you don't make God your focus, and you drift off to these other religions and these other gods, then things will happen. And we've had that again here, and it's like, boy, how many times, why does God keep coming back? Why is he telling him this? And the thing that really bugged me is that as soon as we leave that, in verse 11, we suddenly, it's like you closed the Bible and picked up the newspaper, and we're off reading about the daily news. And you go, wait a minute, here we have this vision, and it ends, and that's it? And it seems kind of strange, because in verse 11 we got Hiram, king of Tyre, supplying Solomon with cedar and cypress and all this stuff. And it doesn't seem to connect. But what I want to suggest, my thinking is, and this is not cast in stone, and it's probably not exactly inspired either, but I think what we're seeing is the grace of God towards Solomon. We're seeing he's talking to his guy Solomon, and remember that God chose him already, even way back. The promise was to David that this is going to be the guy that's going to follow you. So God chose him and selected him out, and he also knows him. And it's easy for us to look at this temple project and to see it as kind of the all-consuming thing, like there's nothing else going on. And we got to remember that this temple project gets completed about halfway through his reign. And so there's a whole world of other things going on in the country at the same time, and they're all happening together. And so what I see here is I think he's already seeing, even though part of Solomon's focused on this, and it tells us that he continues to observe the festivals, he continues to worship and make the sacrifices at the temple. I think there are little indications that Solomon's already starting to be distracted by the management of a kingdom. and his focus on, for us, everyday life. Everyday life is creeping in, and for us, it's mowing the lawn and going to work and finishing the projects we have at work and going to the kids' ball games and doing this and doing that and all the activities of life. With him, it's running a kingdom. And not just any kingdom, he's running a kingdom that is coming to the height of its glory, of its size physically and everything else. And what we're going to see in this next little bit are little vignettes and things that tell you what everyday life looked like. And it's going to tell you, give you some indication of just what's happening in the land. And they're just hints at it, but there's a lot of things we can learn that go along with it. And maybe you'll get a chance to see just a little bit of what Solomon is facing and what God sees. And in his grace, God comes back to him and says, Solomon, I know you, and I know your propensities, and I know your weaknesses, and I'm just trying to get your attention one last time here. Here's the deal. Don't forget. Here's the deal we have. And of course, you and I aren't like that. Just like you especially don't see it in your children when you've said whatever it is. Now, don't walk through that with your muddy shoes, right? Because I just cleaned it. Okay, Mom, right. And they go outside. They're gone 10 minutes, right? And they come back in, and what happens? They're all excited. Mom, we found this frog in the yard, and we go, thump, 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 and guess what? Oh, yeah, we weren't supposed to do that. And we think that's cute and funny, and kids, and we do the exact same thing. You get all busy and focused, and we forget. So he's given us one more reminder there. Let's look at, pick it up about verse 10 there, and we'll just read through a little ways and kind of get a drift of what's going on. And it came about at the end of 20 years in which Solomon had built the two houses, the house of the Lord and the king's house. And then in parentheses here, Hiram, king of Tyre, had supplied Solomon with cedar and cypress timber and gold according to all his desire. Then King Solomon gave Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. So Hiram came out from Tyre to see the cities which Solomon had given him, and they did not please him. Oh, rats. Real estate deal gone bad. And he said, what are these cities which you've given me, my brother? So they were called the land of Kabul to this day. And Hiram sent the king 120 talents of gold. Now, if that is not one confusing passage of Scripture, like, why did God bother to put that in there? And it's interesting that every single commentary I have goes through, evaluates what it says and what it talked about, what Kabul means, and all this sort of thing, has no comment whatsoever on why is it there. Oh, it drives me nuts. Anyway, so let's look at Hiram. And we already know who he is, and we know he was involved, right?
Ron? Solomon is getting lumber and cypress and gold from Hiram.
Yeah.
And Hiram pays Solomon 9,000 pounds.
Yeah, you go, what in the world is that all about? And it appears that we are getting bits and pieces of a much bigger deal. This is what the best that I can figure out, and the best that my commentators have to suggest is, how is it that Hiram gives Solomon money for a bum deal? And I'm not, yeah. I hadn't thought of that. That's got to be it. He's feeling sorry for Solomon. That's the best you got, Solomon. You are in a bad way. Yeah. The only thing I can figure out, and from what the commentators are saying, that those two are not, even though they look connected, that they are not. That they are separate things they're talking about, and this 120 talents of gold is something totally separate from the other deal. And that the other deal looks like what he has done is, of course, Solomon is his source of expertise, his source of lumber, and a lot of other things, says gold as well, and supplied it for the building of all that construction in Jerusalem. And he was integral to that whole thing. And in fact, we'll see, this guy shows up again in some other commercial deals. These guys are business partners. If you get to looking at it, they're doing international trade here on a very large scale, and they're supplying technical expertise, engineering, those kinds of things to Solomon. These guys are also training Solomon's people to sail and to do international trade through shipping is going on somewhere around this time. And they're closely connected. So there's a lot of stuff going on back and forth between them. The interesting thing is he gives them these cities up in this area, up in here somewhere, maybe there or possibly up this way. The reason I say possibly up that way is because of the name that they give it. Kabul, meaning wetland. You gave me a swamp. I thought I was buying oceanside view property, and I went out to take a look at them, and I got a bunch of little dinky villages in a swamp with poor farm ground, and he says, what am I going to do with those? So he rejects the payment from those particular towns. What's interesting is later we'll see Solomon go up there, and he actually builds up that area and kind of puts some development money into it and makes some changes. But it appears that it is part of the land that Israel kind of had, but they never really moved into and developed and made it part of theirs, really didn't populate it. And so somewhere along the line in one of their deals, they exchanged these cities with Hiram because they're close to him. He was going to give them, and then any wealth that came out of there, it becomes, they take them in, and taxes and everything go to Hiram. Hiram says there's not enough there to be worth it. Other than the little glimpses they give you insight into this relationship, I'm not sure there's a huge amount of spiritual truth to take out of that passage, but it's apparently important for us to understand the relationship with these guys and understand what's happening in the nation while that issue about God knowing what's going on with Solomon is happening. The other thing I wanted you to see, that 120 talents that I read about here doesn't mean too much to us today. So just totally by itself, some kind of a deal there where he paid Solomon 120 talents, and that's probably just part of the money that goes back and forth. What is 120 talents? Well, 120 talents, I'm told by the commentators, is somewhere around 16 tons of gold.
Mine says 3,560,000.
3 million, and your book would have been written in, and probably that number comes from a 1962 commentary. They probably pulled that out because I found that in a commentary published in 1962. You know what that 3,500,000 is worth?
76.
Okay, well, I still think they pulled it from that same commentary because it's identical to it. 1962, 3,500,000. What's it worth today? Real fast. $26,320,000. One payment. Does that sound like international trade? Do you get a little glimpse of what Solomon's dealing with? Pretty soon you're going to read about the Queen of Sheba coming up. You know what she gives him? Pretty much the same amount. And he sends back with her, it sounds like different stuff in equal amounts. We're talking super international finance. When you start looking at what his payment in tribute is from the nations that they deal with that now owe him tribute, it's like 4 or 5 times this.
Is that our?
This is $2,012 for that.
Today's money exchange.
Yeah. If you use the calculation that they made back when that commentary was written, it was $3,500,000 in those days, according to their calculation. If you go online and you use the little $1962 in 2012 tool, it's this. Around 7.5 times as much. It takes that many more dollars for the same amount of buying power. So, you thought there was inflation? Yep. It's about 4.2%, something like that on average for those years. So that's a lot of change they're throwing around. That's a big deal. And it kind of lets you get your arms around just a little bit the magnitude of trade and what's going on and what these guys are dealing with. Why is God warning him about his deal? There's one right there. There's 26 million reasons that he needs to be watching Solomon. And Solomon needs to be watching himself. That's really easy to get focused on. So, then we have another little vignette in here, if you will. Well, let's see. On verse 15, we better move along here. Now this is the account of the forced labor which King Solomon levied to build the house of the Lord and his own house, the Milo, and the wall of Jerusalem, Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. So here's the account for the forced labor and all these things. Then verse 16 is kind of a little in between. For Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had gone up and captured Gezer and burned it with fire and killed the Canaanites who lived in the city and had given it as a dowry to his daughter, Solomon's wife. Because if you were in the time this was written reading that, you go, what in the world is Solomon doing down in Gezer? That belongs to Egypt. They conquered that. And he's going, oh, explanation. He married who? One of his first wives was Pharaoh's daughter. Remember, that was a big deal. In fact, he built a house for her in that complex just for her. And the wedding gift was the city. So he got that as part of her dowry. He got this city. And so Solomon went and built it up. Well, where is that? It's down here. So you got to think about, okay, down there, he built that city up. He also mentioned Hazor and Megiddo as being important ones. Let's see if I can find my notes here. Oops, I put Gezer too far down. Gezer is, I get the right one. Coastal plain there. They were way up there. Megiddo is up here. And what was the other one? Already lost it. Hazor is 10 miles north. Hazor is up there. If you've read Revelation, Megiddo ought to ring a bell. In the valley of Megiddo, things happen. So this is the valley right there. Okay, so those places are mentioned, and now our question is, before we charge on, says well, let's go on, charge on, because there's some more cities. We got to get that. He rebuilt Gezer, Lower Beth Horon, and Baalath, and Tamar in the wilderness of the land of Judah. So now I got to find those. One is, Baalath is further over here somewhere. And Beth Horon is, there's Upper and Lower Jerusalem is somewhere here. And it's about in there. There's two cities, Upper and Lower Beth Horon. Which one did I miss? Come on, thank you. 16 miles southwest of the Dead Sea. Can I get most of them? There's some additional ones I'll just throw in from Chronicles just for fun. There's one way past my map up here. Hamath. And there is another one further up called Tadmor. And I think that's it for right now. So there's a bunch of them way up north, 150 miles up there. What's the big deal? Why are those in there? And why should they be important? Well, one of them is what comes right down through here? Interstate 9. It's right here. This is the main interstate from up there, going all of that area up there down to Egypt. It's the main way to get there. Right here is a mountain pass, and guess what's right there in that mountain pass? Megiddo. Why would you build up Megiddo? Crucial for trade, crucial for defense. Both of them really important. These things up here, these are way up north of Damascus, Syria. What's that tell you? How far north his kingdom went. He's controlling areas and building up areas way up there. Why would he do that way up there? If somebody's going to move into your land, are they going to come straight across this way? Why not?
Desert.
They're drilling oil wells out there right now, and you've seen the pictures of the troops out there over the last few years in Iraq. What do you see? Miles and miles and miles of sand. And with a camel, you can't come straight across. They can't make it. They have to follow some water. They're going to come from the north down, or they're going to try to come from the water and come up. There you go. This one is on a main crossroad that goes this way and that way. All these things are either security places. Beth Horon and Upper and Lower Beth Horon are a main road into Jerusalem. These are also main roads into Jerusalem. All those are key places from the standpoint of defense. And then when you get to reading about other cities will be mentioned, and they'll talk about the cities of stores and things like that, the storage places. They're right next to heavy agricultural production areas, and he's got to store food, supplies for the nation there. So, big deal. What's he busy doing? At the same time, he's working on the temple in Jerusalem and beyond. What's happening in this country? It's explosion like crazy of all the development that's going on. And this little chunk of change here is a drop in the bucket of the amount of commerce that's going on in that land that flows with milk and honey. They are frantically busy, and Solomon is the key guy running right smack dab in the middle of everything that's going on. And then you have all these nations all the way around out here, one there, one over there, one up there, one down here, and some on beyond, that you have to keep one eye on all the time, right? And the way that you do that is several ways. That's one. One of them is you build up these cities on these key routes, and you have defensive things. And the other one is you have negotiations and make trade agreements and pacts and treaties. And how better to seal a treaty in those days and that in the cultures that existed at that time? What do? You send one of the family down there, and they're sure not going to attack if their daughter is in Jerusalem. And likewise, are you going to go attack this or do something negative to this place out here if your daughter is close to the king? You're not going to do it. You're less likely to do it anyway. So it was a key negotiating deal that everybody did. Never heard that before. Mom, everybody's doing it. Right? And God specifically told him, of some nations, you shall not do that. But what happened? Why did that happen? Even though he knew. He's a student of the Word. He wrote the Proverbs. He wrote some other passages of Scripture. Why would he let that happen?
Expedience.
It's expedient. It seems important that all his advisors are saying, man, you ought to do that. This is important. It's what you need to do if you want to secure the kingdom, and if you want it, you got to be busy hanging on to things. There's another reason. What do you know about Solomon himself as a person? What do we know about this guy?
He's probably good looking.
Okay.
I mean, okay.
He always called him a mama's boy.
Mama's boy, in a lot of ways. Yep.
Wise, supposed to be.
Supposed to be wise. Rich.
Famous.
Famous. We're going to see
Very
that.
virile.
He takes after his father.
Yeah.
He takes after his father in many ways.
Okay. In some ways, he's, how do I put that? I'll just put father here. You'll know what I mean. Takes after dad.
Chip off the old wall.
A little bit of a chip off the old block. We can see that in a number of ways. I want you to think about, God gave him additional, he was pretty sharp cookie already. And then God gave him an additional gift of wisdom. And when you read some of Proverbs, you'll see some of the insight and the wisdom that he had. But also there's some other things that you don't see in Proverbs and you don't see here directly, but it's hinted at a whole bunch. There's only one book where you find specific references to just how this wisdom expressed itself. But think about the guy that oversees building up, fortifying, designing, managing the billions of dollars worth of commerce and gold and taxes and things are coming in. Under a king system, yes, he has people working underneath him, but this guy is the one that's, it's not like our country. This is the king. So everything is subject to his approval, disapproval, or decision if he wants to do it. Do you see Solomon wanting to do it? Is there anywhere that gives us a clue about what Solomon was involved with and how much he was involved? Well, there is.
His wives.
What's that?
His wives.
Yeah, he was involved. We see in his wives, he was involved there, directly involved in negotiating and setting up all these deals with these outside nations.
But he let them lead him astray as he got older. It says he went after the gods of his
Yep.
many.
We're going to see that that very tool that he used to try to set those up ended up leading him astray. What was seemed convenient at one time is not later.
He wrote about all the things he did to gratify himself, having slaves, having just anything that he wanted.
But you know what she's talking about? Where did he write that?
Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastes is it. We need to go there. You've got to see a whole new light on Ecclesiastes. It's a neat book. It's a frustrating book in some ways. In some ways it can be depressing. But if you understand Solomon and you see him in this picture, Ecclesiastes will make a whole lot more sense to you. Solomon, have you seen some of these individuals on some of the news specials? Every once in a while they'll come across and there's some young kid or something that's 10 years old and he is doing college level stuff and his mind is going all the time and he just gets absolutely bored if he isn't clear into something all the time. And you've seen these guys grow up and they're genius. That's Solomon, I think. I think you're looking at a guy whose mind is never happy sitting on one thing or doing. These other kings, they might be happy to put their feet up and enjoy the food. And this guy, he's trying something new all the time. And Ecclesiastes, you got that described for us. Look at the way he talks here. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So that's who he is. Here's what he says about what he learned in summary in verse 2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What advantage does man have in all his work which he does under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets, and hastening to its place rises there again, blows to the south, and then blows to the north, and the wind continues swirling along, and its circular courses the wind returns. All the rivers flow into the sea, and the sea's not full. To the place where the rivers flow, they go again. It's wearisome. What do you see in that? What do you hear when he's saying that? Boring.
Nothing else.
It's just repetitious, and it's just nothing exciting. He said, look down in verse 13, I set my mind to seek and explore my wisdom concerning all that has been done under heaven. It is a grievous task which God has given the sons of man to be afflicted with. I've seen all the works which have been done under the sun. Behold, all is vanity. What's crooked cannot be straightened. What's lacking can't be counted. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge, and I set my mind to know this wisdom and to know madness and folly. And I realize this too is striving after wind. Because in much wisdom is much grief, and increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. And he goes through, and this whole book then is a study of nearing the end of Solomon's life as he's looking back and saying, all this stuff I tried. I was involved in engineering, I was involved in pleasure, I was involved in the advantages of all the riches, and the whole thing is boring. And God said, I told you. Solomon, I tried to remind you. Here's where it needs to go. And at the very end of Ecclesiastes, you hear him coming back and saying, you know what I learned? The focus has got to be here. God knows me. I need to be paying attention to what he has told me. That's where the hope was. But by now, it's too far down. The die is cast. His son has already pointed the direction. I don't know where in this timeline for sure he wrote Proverbs. I don't know if he wrote Proverbs early on in his reign when Rehoboam was a young man with hopes that he would, grab hold of the being a ruler, and he would, or did he write it later in life as he's beginning to pen these words himself about his own experience and looking over and realizing he's raised a fool. And Rehoboam hasn't got it, and his hope is to try to gather up what he once knew as wisdom and put it down in Proverbs. So maybe, possibly, Rehoboam would read it and he'd head him off at the pass. I don't know which way it is. But you wonder if that's the way it was. Where in that timeline is. The thing that amazes me the most, especially as we come into this Easter season, and we're supposed to be looking to what that temple was pointing us towards and what this guy Solomon knew and somehow lost track on, is that right there. God knew ahead of time that he knew, and still he chose Solomon, and he said, my plan is going to go right on through, and it goes through Solomon, he goes through Rehoboam, and it goes right on through all these sons and grandsons. And some of these guys make Rehoboam look like a saint. And you got to go, God, how can you? He said, I made a promise. I made a promise, and it makes no difference what you do. You don't get to enjoy that promise if you decide to go the wrong direction. But I made that promise, and it goes all the way through to the cross. And doesn't that just blow your mind that God knew that was going to happen? That his son was going to pay that price, and he said, I'm going to do it anyway. Really got me when Pastor was talking about Abraham taking his son out there and pinning him down on that altar when he was asked to sacrifice his son. And he said, his son says, "Where's the sacrifice?" He says, "God will provide the sacrifice." And he did, his son. Isn't that incredible? God said, I won't require you to sacrifice yours, Abraham, but I will sacrifice mine. Isn't that amazing? And he looks at this guy Solomon with all the huge potential he's given him and all the gifts. He says, "I know, Solomon, you are going to blow it big time. I'm reminding you and reminding you and reminding you, and I know it's not going to work." Almost makes me think of that message when Jesus turned around and he says, "I've been asked for the permission to thresh you like wheat, Peter. You're going to be run through the ringer." And it happened. But he says, "But I prayed for you, and when you come out the other side, you just pick up and keep right on going." He said, "I know what's going to happen." It's really something. We look at that time, I just can't imagine what was going through Peter's heart. I was listening to a song this week, it was an Easter song thing, and this guy tells about why he wrote it. And it's the resurrection through the eyes of Peter. He says, I can identify with that guy, and maybe you'll identify with Solomon a little bit as well in this sort of thing, because he failed so terribly. He says, Peter's this guy who promises the Lord the world because of his exuberance and gung-ho. And says when it came down to choices, he says, not only did he deny him 3 times, but at one of those times he turns and the Lord looks him right in the eye. And Peter has no opportunity to go back and say, "I'm sorry. Oh, how could I do that to you, Lord?" He's led off to the cross. And Peter, in this life, before the crucifixion, has no opportunity to go and make it right with his Lord. And you understand why John rushed into the tomb and Peter hung back? Man, it's amazing. God's grace. And he comes back and he says, "Peter, you just pick up and you just go right on. I knew it was going to happen. It was paid for on the cross." Boy, if we can't identify with a guy like Solomon, there is nobody in this book. Even though he was dealing with millions, we're dealing with pennies. But I hope maybe you get a new look at Solomon and a new look at this passage of Scripture. And next time, I promise, we'll start hitting the gas pedal and things are going to speed up. As we see, yeah, I know, promises. But we'll see things changing pretty fast for this nation, and there's some huge lessons for all of us in that as we watch them rise to their peak, and this one, they're going to go over the top as we proceed. Father, we thank you for our time together this morning, and especially on this Easter Sunday as we celebrate the resurrection of our Lord. May we have eyes to see your grace, that understood that we would never be able to meet the standards that you put out for us, even though you reminded Solomon over and over. I think it was, in a way, it was a reminder to us that we cannot do it ourselves. And you knew that. And you had planned all along to put the cross there. Maybe that's why Solomon was instructed to build that temple, because it would take his eyes back to the holy place, back to the place where the shed blood was put every year, as a reminder that it might call him back before the end of his life to realize that following his Lord was what he was really designed to do, and that your grace had covered those sins, and that we might be able to trust in you through that. Thank you, Father, for our time this morning. In Jesus' name.
Amen.